What has Kwazi been like as an addition to your room?
I would say he's definitely been, fun to coach and fun to work with. He's got a different kind of, aura and personality to him. It's very similar to Ja'Cory in that way, to where people gravitate towards him. So, the older guys, Nazea, Ja'Cory, Wood, and those guys, they kind of, speak the same lingo because they have the experience and playing experience. And then the younger guys, I feel like they really listen to him when he speaks, just because of his ability, if I'm being honest. And then, he has some production in college, so I think, anytime where you can have a guy that has production, it's better for the room. It, promotes more competition, and then, he's fitting in perfect with those guys. He's working extremely hard right now.
Besides his production, what did you like about him? I mean, when you interviewed him,
yeah,
he said this fits.
Yeah. Well, I would say, he came on a visit with his mother, and, his girlfriend, not too fond of that. Girlfriend's coming on visits, but, his demeanor, very mature approach. You can tell he definitely loves football. His visit was all ball. I think we might have met for 2 hours talking football, and, the questions continue to, flow at dinner, just football conversations. And, when he gets here, it's so hard when you're in the portal because you get a short amount of time with guys, so it's hard to really get a feel for him, and you don't know what's real and what's not. But it's like when he first got here, he's like, Coach, you want to go over the plays? Coach, can we watch some indie drills? Coach, can we go over, certain concepts? And we just honestly just got done watching practice again for the third time since yesterday. So, he's eager, he's willing to learn, and he loves football.
What stands out about Kwazi from a route running and technique standpoint?
I would just say he's such a fluid route runner. He's got some creativity to him, which I think is great for the room. Not only for him, but for other guys to see. Just guys that may not be used to seeing routes ran like that, which is really good for the room to see that. And then just his thought process, he's always, got a plan at the line of scrimmage, whether it works or it doesn't work. He's trying to work a certain technique. That way if he has success, he can come back to it. And if he doesn't have success, he knows what to learn from that, if that makes sense.
He's kind of an exception in that room where you have a lot of veteran guys back who have been on the team. What can you do in a spring like this when guys have been in the program for more than a year, maybe, that you couldn't do a year ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the comfort level in that room. It's a lot. It's a year or two with mostly everybody in that room except for Kwazi and the young guys that we brought in. So anytime you go into year two, you kind of got to feel for how your room is, what we need to work on, things we do well that we need to continue to do well. But, just the growing pains going from year one, even if they weren't a freshman last year, just first time working with those guys, going into year two, I feel like, that's already paying off. And I think Kwazi was such a good addition because, yes, this is year one with him, but we're kind of picking up as if he was here last year, if that makes sense.
Collectively, are there things that they're doing out there now that they weren't doing a year ago, maybe?
Yes, definitely harping on more detailed in the route running, more detailed, more after the catch ability, trying to make people miss after the catch. And I think it's funny because anytime you add competition to the room, you can tell the eagerness of coming off of the football. Dudes are trying to run full speed and trying to get the ball because they know there's other good players around them that have a chance to get the ball too. Not even in a wideout room, but backs and tight ends included.
What's growth in year three look like for Ja'Cory Barney?
Growth in year three, I would just say, one, Coach Campbell and his staff has done a really good job with him. He looks stronger. His balance has gotten a lot better. He's looking like he's getting more flexible. Just honing in on the details with Ja'Cory. He's such an exciting player, and he's so fast that sometimes you kind of wanted to slow down for him so he can, be deliberate in everything he does. And I think Kwazi's been great for him as far as that aspect too as well.
Coach Rule just mentioned the importance in building this offense of the scramble drill that you guys were working yesterday.
Yeah.
How do you coach that part of things with your receivers, knowing that you have a quarterback with a different skill set than what they played with last year?
Absolutely. Well, one, the quarterbacks, not only, but all those guys are dynamic. They can run, they can create legs with their feet, but, just harping on that's where big plays come from. Scramble drills, quarterbacks getting out of the pocket, escaping the pocket, just making sure we're, being alert and being alive downfield, getting to certain spots on the field that we need to get to, and just understanding that that's where you can create free explosive plays. So, we try to harp on that every practice. Coach actually showed us, some offensive film from Vanderbilt doing it last year. Obviously, they had a really good quarterback and they had a successful season. And just how those dudes would, get into their routes as soon as they see him escape the pocket, they're, running around with their head on fire trying to get open and get the football. So it's definitely been something we've been emphasizing on.
What does Quinn Clark's progress look like?
I like the way he's progressing right now. I like the way Quinn's progressing. I think last year was such a hard season for him just because it was so taxing on him. He went from being a redshirt freshman or a redshirt freshman his first year into his actual redshirt freshman season last year and just, practicing and doing everything we asked. And sometimes he plays, sometimes he doesn't. But it was just hard on his body. And I think he admitted that in our exit interviews last year, that it was probably the hardest year of his life in football. But, biggest thing with Quinn is he's a freak. If you look at his size, he can run, he can bend, his catch radius is phenomenal. Just having him tap in mentally, day by day, just pushing himself and, just letting himself go and just attack each day. And I like the way he's progressing right now. They're doing a great job with him in the weight room as well.
Is there things that when a guy's that tall, you got to teach it a little bit different than maybe somebody who's
100%.
5'9"?
Yeah, 100%. He's definitely a guy that you got to coach differently in that room. And you just can't let him be too robotic. You know what I mean? The things he do is going to look different than a guy like Ja'Cory Barney or Cortez Mills, and you have to be okay with that. Sometimes it's not going to look as clean, but it's still efficient. You know what I mean? So a lot of things with Quinn is, cleaning up some things at the line of scrimmage with him, but, just making sure that he's putting himself in a body position to win the winning moment when the plays comes. And I think, he's starting to realize that, and he's focusing on that more. So, I expect for him to keep coming along, and we demand a lot from Quinn. We got high expectations from him, so we'll see.
I know he's in a different place in his development, but physically there's some similarities there between Quinn and Jeremiah Jones.
Yes.
How do you see him coming along, considering the short period of time that he's been in the program, and what kind of a ceiling does he have here if he continues to progress?
Jeremiah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, him and Quinn are obviously the bigger bodies in that room. With them both being bigger bodies, JJ's a little bit more, rigid. He's more stronger. Quinn's more smooth. He still has play strength, but he's more smooth. JJ's kind of strong runner. But he's still only in his second semester technically because he didn't early enroll last year within football. So, last year training camp was kind of his first time, going through competitive football here. So he's making plays on his own ability. And now we're trying to focus in on him, zoning in on the details, and just while not putting too much on his plate. I mean, you look at JJ, he's a genetic freak. He has to help our team, win games at some capacity this year. And I think we're trying to figure that out now as we move forward.
How do you feel about the overall strength of your room, just in totality?
Yeah, the strength as far as in numbers or strength or
Prowess, overall play.
I feel pretty good about it, if I'm being honest. We got about 4 to 5 dudes in there that's got some valuable playing time, some more than others, and then I think we got some young guys that are embracing the hard work and that's going to be ready for when their numbers call. So I feel pretty good. I think that room's really close, so that's been making my job a lot easier to coach them. We demand a lot. Obviously Coach Holgorsen and Coach Rule, they do a great job of not letting up and letting those guys get complacent, which they shouldn't be at all, if I'm being honest. But I feel pretty good about it.
How do you keep guys encouraged? You have 2 returners coming back, and obviously you brought in Kwazi. How do you keep some of the young guys encouraged that their time's coming and, that they still have an opportunity to play?
Just by pushing them and motivating them. We really don't have time for guys to feel sorry for themselves or kind of take a step back. So we're on those guys a lot, if that makes sense. And, you never know when your number's going to get called. So, you just got to continue to get better and improve day by day because your number might be called week 1, your number might be called tomorrow's practice, or it might be called in the bowl game, just like Quinn's was last year. So, like I said, that it's hard to understand with how close that room is. They really love each other and have each other's back. So I think the older guys really do a good job of bringing those younger guys along, because it's tough for those guys right now, especially, guys like Nayland Scott and Larry Miles just kind of, getting here, trying to figure it out. But they've been doing a good job.
Seems like Dana keeps a pretty close eye on that group.
Yeah.
Is he pretty involved?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I mean, receivers are his babies. You know what I mean? I know you guys, see Dana's physical presence, believe it or not, but he played the receiver position. Yeah, seriously. And he was pretty good, from what I've heard. But, he's coached it at a high level for such a long time. He's called plays for that position. He's been a head coach, but he always gravitates towards the receiver position. I feel like he's pretty hard on those guys. And I think that's pretty cool. He calls plays from the sideline on game day, and as a receiver, you want that. You want to have a direct dialogue with the play caller. So that way you can communicate things you see, and then sometimes he needs to get after them and tell him he needs more, or hey, I'm coming to you right here. I need you to make a play.
What have you seen from Larry and Nayland? What's your challenge to them for freshman season?
The biggest thing I'm focusing on those two guys right now as we go through spring ball is just play speed. They're talented, especially like a guy like Larry. He has a knack for getting open. Has a really good feel for the game. He's smaller, but he's quick twitch. He's got big hands. He's got good ball skills. Now we just got to get him to play fast. And a guy like Nayland, who's different. He's kind of got an Isaiah/Bonner build. Really strong player, really strong hands, and now it's just getting him used to the conditioning aspect of it, just being able to go all day. Our guys do a lot in practice, just like everybody else on the team. So, just getting those guys to play fast consistently, and the plays will come.
Can you tell that Larry caught 400 passes in high school? I mean, he caught a crazy amount.
Yeah, you can, and it's funny. Like Larry, we gave him a nickname. I challenged him. Obviously the game's so fast when we first, started blocking on the perimeter when we put the pads on, and he's not scared of anything. He's a willing blocker. He loves football. I would say that about Larry. But I was messing with him in the room. We know he's from Orlando. I gave him the nickname Disney World. So he focused on his blocking yesterday, and he came to me and said, "Coach, can I get my nickname taken off now?" Because he made some blocks, which is pretty cool. I mean, I'm glad he's embracing that. But, yeah, you can tell he caught a lot of passes. He just got such a good feel for, working routes and setting defenders up. Now it's just getting him to understand at the collegiate level that time's happening a lot faster where he needs to speed some things up.
All good. All right.
Thank you, guys.